Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're going to be talking about my top 10 filler board games. Now, what's a filler board game? Now, a filler is a term that we use for a shorter game that's used to kind of sandwich between either two longer games or something that fills up the time when your game session is getting close to its end. So, for example, you play a game that's like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then maybe you want a quick break, so you use a filler board game before you jump into a larger one. Or it's the end of the game night, you just finished a huge long game, you got a couple minutes left, you can pull out one of these filler games, and these are going to be great ways to, kind of put a cap on that wonderful game night. So let's go ahead and jump into the list. Now, before we start, I do have 3 honorable mentions. The first one is for the game Camel Up 2nd Edition. Now, Camel Up 2nd Edition, incredible game where you are going to be playing as these gamblers, and you are going to be predicting where these camels are going to be going during this large race. Now, this game barely missed this list because I think it's a little bit longer than what a filler should be, especially with higher player counts. The game ranges from 30 to 45 minutes, and based on the number of players, these camels are going to go, can be manipulated many times. A lot of people are taking turns, so the game can go a little bit longer than what I think is appropriate for like a filler style game. This is still a relatively quick game, but it just missed the list because of that time. But incredible game, but 10 out of 10 for me. I think this is great, uproaring fun. So wonderful one, and the new edition is beautiful. My second honorable mention is for Super Fantasy Brawl. This is my favorite skirmish game. It's a great 2 or 4 player game, but it just ekes out of being a little bit too long for my taste. Now, if you're playing this with somebody who knows the game fairly well, it's going to be very quick. So in this game, you're going to have a team of 3 guys, and you're going after the other team of 3 guys trying to complete these objectives. And when you're just learning the game, you're going to read the cards and kind of get familiar with the system. But if you're with somebody who knows what they're doing, the game goes by very quickly, and it's maybe 25, 30 minutes, which I think is a great kind of end of a large game day session. I play this a lot with my friend Robert after we play Kingdom Death Monster, so we'll play that for hours and then finish up with a quick game of this. So I think it's a great filler game in that sense, but I don't think it's quite as accessible as these other filler games, and it only fits 2 and 4 players, so it's hard to kind of fit that niche, so it just barely missed this list. But fantastic game nonetheless. Love it. 10 out of 10 for me. And then my last filler game on here is going to be for Hanamikoji. So Hanamikoji is a fantastic, once again, a 10 out of 10. All these games that barely missed the list are incredible games, but this one here is a awesome kind of line control, area control style game with a really clever action mechanism. So it's a 2-player only game, and you're going to be playing cards to either side of this this line of geisha, and your job is to get the most favor by collecting the most cards on that side. And so this game can be over in a round, or it can be over in multiple rounds, and that's why it barely missed this list for me. First one is it's only 2 players, so the scope of this is very limited on the amount of people you can actually play, so it's hard to fit into that grouping, but for 2-player it's amazing. That's why I put it on this honorable mention. Also, this game can be a little bit longer than you might want because based on the skill level of the players and how the cards run out, you may tie in specific rounds. Nobody wins, and so you might have several rounds in a row that you're playing one after another until the game actually concludes, and it could make it go a little bit longer. So that's why I left this one off this list. But this game is so great in its action selection system and just the card play and the tense decisions. It's an I cut you choose game. I talk a lot about this game, but that's my last honorable mention on this list. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the list with my number 10, Don't Mess with Cthulhu. Don't Mess with Cthulhu is a deduction-style game, social deduction, where you have some people that are occultists, some people that are investigators, and the investigators are trying to find all of these elder signs, while the cultists are trying to either confuse them enough in order to, waste their time so they don't find those signs, or hit Cthulhu for an auto-win. And so the way this is done is through this really cool system here, and it's probably my favorite part of the game is the flashlight system. So everybody has an equal number of cards in front of them. You'll shuffle them up, put them in front of you, and use the flashlight, and that player is going to pick a player to reveal that card that they choose. But it's really cool. At the start of the round, each player is going to say what they have, essentially. They're going to look at their stuff, shuffle it, put it down, and then they'll explain what they have and what they can, what the actual potential choices are. So you could lie, but I mean, it could be pretty apparent if you lie. You could tell the truth, and people might think you're lying. It is really cool because it has this facilitation for lying that is built into the game, where you're not just making stuff up. You're basing things off of things that people are actually saying. So I really like that when social deduction games implement that, so that there's not just shouting and yelling. It's actual, you're thinking about decisions you're making, and it's up to you to determine when the best time to give misinformation is. So I really like that. That's Don't Mess with Cthulhu, my number 10 for great filler games. My number 9 is for the game Rumble in the Dungeon. Rumble in the Dungeon is a series of games, Cthulhu in the House, Rumble in the House. You have all these different styles, but this one in particular is fantasy themed. Rumble in the Dungeon is a great game. It plays up to 6, I believe, and you can have it play up to 12, but it can be either 1 round or 3 rounds. But the game is great in its simplicity, and I really appreciate that when games are simplistic. So very straightforward. You have 2 people and you're trying to keep them alive, and they are in this dungeon set up like this. So you have 2 question marks that represent your people, and it's your job to keep your little people alive. And the twist on this, though, is you can use any character. So you can use any character and you can attack with any character. It doesn't have to be your characters. You just have to manipulate things so that your characters survive. So that's really awesome right off the bat. There's prediction and clever movement. And my favorite part of this game is the movement in the game itself. So the players will create this dungeon in front of them. And when you move, you can move any character into a room. But if somebody's already in a room, they're actually stuck and it's a battle to the death. And I love that, where you can force things, but you don't have to fight right away. You can shove a bunch of people in the same room, have a big old party. It is a blast. I love the gameplay on this one. I love the predicting and the bluffing that has to do with the moving pieces, and it scales extremely well with high and low player counts. I think this is a wonderful filler game. That's my number 9, Rumble in the Dungeon. Awesome game. Number 8 is going to be Cockroach Poker Royal. Cockroach Poker is a very straightforward game where you're going to be offering a card to somebody and saying, is this? Or this is a blank, and they have to either agree or disagree, or they can look at it and give it to somebody else and ask that same question. Royal notches up the difficulty and the choices a little bit by adding some new special cards, as well as the Royal Suit, which has this little crown. And that's my favorite part in this game, specifically in Royal, are the royals themselves. So when you tell somebody something is something, you would say that, hey, this is a bat, and they have to say yes or no. But the royal adds a twist into here. So if you give a card that has a crown on it, you can say, hey, this is a royal. Or if you give one that's not a crown, you could say this is a royal, and that's a legitimate suit type. So you could be lying about the fact that it's like a bat, but if it's a royal or something like that, you can really trip people up, and it's really fun. The other thing about royals is if you take them, you get a penalty, and you lose the game when you have 4 of the same creature in front of you, or you dump your hand. And so getting a penalty can really ruin somebody, because you get a card from this separate stack that's going to go in front of you as well. So I really like that mechanic. It adds a lot more tension and almost a fear to the game, and I think that's a lot of fun. And you can also play the original game of Cockroach Poker with just these cards. So I think that's really cool. You have some choices, and they're all basically little modular expansions you can use, and it's a blast. It's a great game. It's great because it's language independent. I use this in my classroom a lot, and it's one that I have a blast with. So love this one. I love the goofy images, the pictures. I can talk about this one a lot too. That's Cockroach Poker, my number 8. Number 7 is going to be Fantasy Realms. So Fantasy Realms is a wonderful hand-building game. So this has a very simplistic system where all you're going to do is draw a card from either the top of the deck or the center of the table, add it to your hand, and then discard a card to the center of the table. And the game is over when there are 10 cards in the center. You score all your cards, and boom, that's it. That's the game. And this simplicity in this design is so wonderful. And my favorite part about this game are the cards themselves and the bonkers abilities on the cards. So there's a whole bunch of cards in this game, and each card is going to have a bonus or potentially a penalty, and that's all based on the other cards that you get that go with it. So my favorite thing is some cards present you a challenge, like for example, this gem here, the Gem of Order. Your whole goal with it is to have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As you can see, he got 2, 3, 4, 5. So he's on his way to getting that complete Gem of Order. So really neat. I really like that there are bonkers things that you can do in this game, and you have this large deck of cards, so you're constantly hoping that you draw what you need, and some other players might have them in their hands. They may show up as you play. So I love that it's short, it's quick, and it's fun to create these combos. Love this game. The expansion is also wonderful for it. That's my number 7, Fantasy Realms. My number 6 is for the game Bullet Heart. Now, Bullet Heart is a fantastic real-time game where you're going to be pulling out these bullets out of a bag, and you're going to be dropping them into your current here. And this current is going to collect bullets, and if they eventually get to the bottom here, they'll hit you and you'll take damage. If you get all 4, you're out, you lose, and yeah, that's it. So you're going to be mitigating these bullets by using these abilities on your right side here, as well as using pattern cards. You need to use these pattern cards to get specific patterns, and then that will eliminate these bullets and these little stars. This game is really cool, and my favorite part of this game is the variability and all the different players. So each of these character cards, they are completely different. And notice they're kind of sectioned here because you pull them off. And they each come with their own ability, just basic ability, like this one has these cool bullet tokens. And they also have their own special actions on the right here that you can use your action points for. So I really like that. I think it's super fun. And the reason this is a great filler game is it's super short. Maximum time this could take, each round is 2 minutes. And a lot of the times this game is going to be over in 15 minutes or less. And I think that's really awesome for a game that is this intense and this fun. It has player elimination. So if you're already closing this with the end of the night, that's an easy way to, if you're eliminated, you can start packing up and head out. It's also a good one that people can just enjoy themselves. You can also play cooperatively, so you don't have to deal with that player elimination if you don't like that aspect of it, and I think that is amazing as well. So I really enjoy this one. That is Bullet Hearts. Fantastic game, fantastic art, fantastic components. Get the deluxe edition. Those wooden bullets are amazing. That's my number 6. My number 5 is Deception Murder in Hong Kong. As I said before, I really enjoy social deduction games where there is information present, and this one is the best at what it does. So in this one, you play as a bunch of policemen, policewomen in Hong Kong, and one of your fellow police officers has committed a crime and murdered somebody. And so you don't know who it is, and the forensic scientist, though, is filtering information to help guide everybody to see what it is. And they're doing this through these cards. So you have 4 evidence cards, which are at the top, and 4 murder weapon cards in front of each player. So each player has potential to be the murderer, which is really cool. And each of these characters are, each round, essentially, the forensic scientist is going to have these cards here that they're going to be presenting clues on. It could be the cause of death, the location of the crime, and then other things that are going to, give you information as to what the potential weapons could be. If it's poisoning, could that be maybe the venomous scorpion? That could be it. Or the venomous snake. Oh, this guy's not looking so good. So the murderer, though, has some choice in this. They are going to be picking 2 specific cards on their own board to try to confuse the forensic scientists and make it harder for them to give clues. So I really like that. I think it's a lot of fun, and my favorite part of this game has to be the clue cards themselves. I think they're hilarious. So potted plant, death by potted plant, that's amazing. I love when the forensic scientist has to explain how this person died via potted plant, and there was some red wine there, and they have to explain that in these very vague tiles. And it's cool. The forensic scientist has a way that they can create a story. And I love that every player gets a chance to say what they think and who the murderer is, and there's actual evidence that they can base their opinions off of. And I think that's so good. So that's my number 5, Deception Murder in Hong Kong. My number 4 is for the game Coloretto. Coloretto is a new favorite of mine. This is a fantastic one. A very straightforward game of collecting chameleons. Now, the trick in this game is you can only score your 3 highest sets of chameleons, and the rest are negative points. So it can be very scary, and the way you're going to be gathering these cards is through these boats. So on your turn, you're going to have these cards here and these stacks, and so you're going to be, on your turn, either taking a stack of cards or adding to the stack of cards until it gets to 3. So really cool. I love this choice of do I get more cards, or do I potentially risk it, or do I take the cards here? It's really neat when people start understanding the game because they can look at everybody's board and kind of mess with people with the way they're placing cards. So you're always probably going to take a negative point unless you're taking small amounts of cards. So I really enjoy this one, and the scaling for those sets can be pretty crazy. So the negative scale as well as the positive for the amount that you have, and I think that's a lot of fun. Now, the most recent edition of this one, I think it's this Coloretto here, you also get some bonus cards included with it, and those are a lot of fun. They add little twists to the gameplay, and there's some recent promos on BGG that you can grab that are limit cards, which will change the amount of specific colors you can have per stack. So I've had a lot of fun with this one. Coloretto, fantastic game. That's my number 4. My number 3 is for the game Capital Lux 2 Generations. Now, this is the newest game on this list for sure, but one that I have just had an incredible time with. So Capital Lux 2 Generations has you basically playing an area control game that's all abstracted through cards. So extremely tactical, extremely fun, extremely straightforward, but also extremely brain-burnery and potentially unforgiving. And I think this game is incredible. So this game has you picking up a hand of 6 cards, drafting them, and then on your turn, you're playing a card either in front of you, and that's going to let you score at the end of the round, or you're going to put it in the center to increase the amount of scoring you're able to do. So at the end of the round, if the amount in the middle is lower than the amount that you have in front of you, you lose all of your stuff, so you can bust, which is terrifying. But it is so cool because when you play to the center, yes, you're losing that potential scoring, but you're getting an effect. And that's where this game shines, is the simplicity of the actions, the simplicity of everything, but the effects that change as you play. Now, this game is absolutely gorgeous. It's art by Quanche Moria, but the simple gameplay, the short time, the easy to get into, but the absolutely bonkers effects that can potentially occur are incredible. So each of the games that you play, you're going to pick one of these tiles that gives the ability to a specific color. And the combinations of these abilities are insane. And a lot of these abilities are going to introduce new components, so potentially new cards, tokens, coins, all sorts of really awesome stuff. And you can also just play a very simplified version where you don't add a lot of components, and that's also a lot of fun. So I love that this game is just so interesting, so different in what it's doing, and it's a more refined version of the initial Capital Lux. And I think that this is a wonderful design, wonderful game. I love this one. So once again, the gameplay is completely different from 2 to 4. It can play 5 if you have the Kickstarter additional components, but the base game of this is what we have in our library, and we are so content with this. I'm pretty sure I'm going to hunt down a Kickstarter version of this, but man, I'm so impressed with Capital Lux 2 Generations. So fantastic game. That's my number 3. My number 2 is for the game Biblios. Biblios is a Steve Finn game, Dr. Steve Finn, and he makes all sorts of fun board games, but I think this is his true masterpiece. This is his lightning in a bottle, one of my favorite games ever. This is it's incredible design. So in Biblios, you're going to be taking two halves of the game. And I love that. I love the idea of two halves in a game. And so the first half, you're going to be collecting cards from a central deck. And on your turn, you reveal one card at a time to the number of players plus 1. So you either decide to keep the card in your hand, you leave it face up for the other people at the table, or you put it in a bid pile. But you have to make the decision right away, and I love that because all these cards are going to be what allow you to score at the end of the game. You're trying to collect the most cards in a specific color, and you score points based on these dice here. So if you have the most browns, you're going to score 6 points here, which is super cool. So these values all start the same. They're all at 3, and I love that. So during the course of the game, some players may pick up these plus and minuses and actually change the value of the dice and how much they're actually worth. So that's amazing. But in addition, at the start of the game, you're also going to be collecting these money cards potentially, which will help you buy cards in the second half of the game. So first half of the game, you're collecting all these cards. Second part of the game, all those cards you put into that bid pile are going to be put out for auction, and you're going to use those money cards you collected to buy them. And now you have some knowledge of what's in there based on what you put in there, but there's also, however many players you're playing with, you have that much stuff that you don't know, and I love that. I think that's so cool. I love the idea that you have this hidden knowledge, and the gameplay course is so smooth, the actions are quick, the bidding is fast. This is just a fun, amazing style of game. Despite the theme, I think that the artwork is wonderful. The theme is fun. I like the idea that you're trying to make your books the best by like using dyes and getting the correct amount of quills and whatnot. I think it's so cool, and the gameplay is so smooth and so fun. Amazing. I really like this one, and go figure what's going to be number 1 here. Oh man. So my number 1 here is For Sale. Now, For Sale is very similar to Biblios in a lot of ways. It has 2 distinct halves. It has the buying phase and then the selling phase. It has the auctioning system in it, but this is the most streamlined, best auctioning game that I think exists, period. So in For Sale, you play as house flippers. So you're going to be buying houses and then flipping them and selling them on the market right away to try to make a profit. And that is such a fun theme right off the bat. I don't think there's any other game where you do that, and this does it incredibly. So you start off the game, everybody with the same amount of money, and you're going to be taking all of these cards and you are going to be bidding on them. So in that first round, you're going to be bidding money to collect these cards. In the second round, you're going to use the cards that you collected in order to bid on values. However, in the first half of the game, it's an open auction where you just kind of pay money, and if you get more than the other person, you get the higher card. And so you're always going for the highest card. And that's really easy because you don't have to track anything outside of that. In the second half, though, you use the cards you collected to bid for these values, and these values go from like 0 to 15, and so you can have huge gaps. But as you can see here, doesn't matter how much you spent on that card. The houses go from 1 to 30, so it doesn't matter how much you spent on those cards. You actually are going to be using them to claim values, and you could get ridiculous amounts of money. Like in here, remember, numbers from 1 to 30, so 30 is extremely high. This person here is winning $15,000 using a 7, which is in like terms of this game, that's really, really good. And so it's kind of up to you when is the best time to use these value cards for the houses, and I think that is super cool. So I love how simple this game, how streamlined this game is, how straightforward it is, how easy it is to play, but the tense decisions and the flow of the game are just so good. So Biblios, I think, is definitely the more thinky, more strategic game, but because this game has distilled all of these facets down into into two simple mechanisms in those first and second halves, it's got to give it. I have to give it to For Sale. This game is amazing. This game has it. It's incredible. If you don't own this one, please go buy it. I think it's the best game. Anybody can play it. It has a theme that reaches a lot of people, and it's one that you can play so many times and never get bored of. This is an incredible game. So For Sale, my number one. So that is my list. What did you think of my list of top 10 filler board games? Do you agree? Do you disagree with my picks? I'd love to hear what you think. But thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.